Oh, Evan's joining us. Trek class alum. Maybe we'll see his video. Hey.
Hello.
Welcome.
What's up?
We're just getting started. We are broadcasting live right now. We got a couple of members of the class here with us, and Ashley. So just sort of waiting a few minutes here for people to start watching the video if they are going to, or join us on the chat alone. Maybe we'll see his video.
Can you see me? Hello?
We can. Hey.
Hello.
Welcome.
What's up?
We're just getting started. We are broadcasting live right now. We got a couple of members of the class here with us, and Ashley. So just sort of
Evan, it looks like you're sitting in a dark room.
For people to start watching the video if they are going to, or join us on the chat.
I've got like some really bad latency. Hang on.
Yeah, it looks like you're hiding in a tunnel. Well, there he goes. We lost him. Okay, so we might as well get underway here. In a few minutes, I'll actually post that same invite out to the whole class. So if there's any video chat spots open and anybody happens to grab it, they can join in with us.
There.
But anyway, hi Evan. Anyway, I wanted to kick this off by asking each of you to just sort of say who you are and why you're here in Who class, and just sort of make sure that we all know who's chatting with us right now. So actually, why don't we, because we have been chatting a little bit with Heather mostly before we got started. Heather, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things you were just sharing with us.
Okay. I'll try to keep it brief. I was born in Australia, so I got to grow up with Doctor Who on the telly when I was very little. And I just moved to the United States in 2003. Sorry, yes. So I've been here since New Who started, which, and I know that most people in America, it's like they got to see Doctor Who on PBS, little bits and pieces, all out of order and stuff. So first thing I did when I came over here is I brought all my videotapes and sat down with my new husband and said, right, we're watching Doctor Who. It took us a year and a half, but we got there. So we watched it from the start, right up to Survival. I skipped the movie because, it's the movie. But yeah, since I've been here, so and of course Doctor Who has really taken off here. So I know a lot of fans of Doctor Who. In fact, there's a friend of mine who put me onto this class. She's sort of like, "There's this really cool thing I found," and I'm like, oh, "This looks awesome. I've got to do this class." And as we were just talking about with Anthony, was I'm also in the Doctor Who fan orchestra, which is a little beastie that started up about 3 or 4 years ago now. And there's this fella in England who he basically listens to the music, deconstructs it back down to what it should be, writes it out, transcribes it, arranges it for orchestra and voice, and sends out music and a click track to people, and we record our individual audio parts, send them all into him, and he patches them together and makes a full orchestral piece out of it. So we've got quite a few. We've got 9 different pieces up online now. Yeah, which was really cool. I wasn't in the very first one. I didn't know about it. And there was a friend of mine in one of our Doctor Who sort of fan groups that I'm in. So I said, "Oh, I've just found this thing," and posted up the very first one they did, and I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool! I wish I'd seen that." And when it right at the end it said, "Oh, and our next piece is going to be Valet Decem," and I'm like, oh, "I'm so in." Sent off an email, said, "Yes, I sing and I play clarinet. Please let me join." And I've been there ever since.
You've shared a couple of them with the class, and I hope that you keep sharing that kind of stuff. I don't know if there'll be any new ones during the course of the class, but there doesn't have to be. I just think they're great. So
the next one will probably start in a couple of months. We're going to be doing a suite. A Donna suite is next.
Okay.
So we know what it's going to be, but we haven't got the music yet or anything. So it's going to be several months before it's going to be up, and probably a couple of months before we even get started on it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you. Let's ask Kelly to introduce herself now and her TARDIS, which is awesome.
Yes, well, you know, it gets me from A to B. My name's Kelly Hodges. I live in Indiana, and I started watching the show around about the reboot time, the Christmas episode, or the Christmas Invasion with David Tennant. That was my first, and I was in love ever since. And then I went back and watched Eccleston, and went back even further and watched all the old stuff, and yeah, it's oh gosh, I'm getting nervous.
No reason to get nervous. It's just us.
I can talk about Doctor Who all day long. It's kind of influenced my life a little bit because it's really gotten me into film and writing, and that's what I decided to get into for a career or whatever. I've done like independent films with my friends around Indiana. I've got friends from Chicago that we've talked about doing some stuff with, and Doctor Who is kind of that big influence because I loved this show so much, and there was so much heart and passion in the show, and I was like, I want to be a part of something like that. I mean, it'd be great to actually work on Doctor Who, but you know, until then, I'll just do my own project. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those life-changing shows that I think everybody can agree with on that. So.
Yeah. Okay, so one thing I'm going to ask is that anybody not using earbuds, when you're actually not talking, try to mute your mic, because I think that's what makes the echo happen. But just FYI, and Kelly, I hope you do get to work on Doctor Who, actually, because reading some of the things that you've written, I think you'd be quite good at it.
Thank you.
So we'll come back to that in a minute. Let me actually go over to Evan now, who I just made mute his microphone, and just tell us a little bit about himself.
Hello, all.
Hi.
I actually was Anthony's student at one point for another class that I used to teach called Trek class, and it's essentially Doctor Who class, but it's Star Trek. And that's how I met him, and I loved his teaching style. I thought that he had just like a really good grasp on what it was that he was doing, and so I decided to take this class. I'm no longer in school anymore, but any excuse to, I don't know, watch TV, I guess.
That's because you graduated. It's not because you
I graduated. I actually don't have an excuse to be around anymore, so they made me leave.
Yes.
But no, as far as Doctor Who goes, I've always kind of been interested in the idea, but Anthony knows this. I was creating a comic book for my thesis, and part of the 3 years that I spent in grad school was to try to not consume similar content to kind of eke out my own idea. And so I spent a little bit of time actually avoiding watching Doctor Who because I knew that if I did watch some of it, I'd like, oh, there goes one of my ideas, like it's already out there. And so I would have that excuse to say I wrote this without seeing it. But
so you're talking about your comic book series that is heavily influenced by time travel, heavily involved in time travel. Right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I could see how you would not want to be influenced.
And so I tried to avoid it, but it was unavoidable, and now I'm watching Who, and
all the time.
That's good.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you're here with us. Okay, let's see. Now, James is back with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm James Suits. I'm from Syracuse, so I'm actually getting to attend the live class, which is awesome.
Good.
And I started with Doctor Who when I was a kid, watching the Tom Baker episodes on PBS. I was probably 7 or 8, I guess, at the time. And so I always remember that haunting theme music and the scarf and the whole bit. And then I kind of skipped 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctors, and my next exposure was the TV movie.
Yeah.
So I've always had a big soft spot for Paul McGann. And then I kind of picked it up again, with the reboot, and at one point I decided I wanted to try and see all the classics. So I finally finished that in November after 4 years of, little binge watching here and there.
Yeah.
But,
one thing I wanted to ask you is, or actually the whole class as well, do you guys notice or feel that there's a difference between Doctor Who fans who first experienced Doctor Who as a child, the way you just described, where the theme music is certainly, haunting, and some of the situations are legitimately scary to children. Not that Doctor Who can't be scary to adults. Do you guys see that there's a difference between people who came to it as adults and came to it as children?
I think a little bit.
Yeah, I've come across a few fans who are sort of like, they've never seen any of the classic stuff, and they're sort of like, most of them acknowledge that yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff that came earlier, and they either are not interested in seeing it or they just haven't got around to it yet. But I have come across just the odd one or two who are like, oh, that stuff doesn't count, and that really that irks me. It's like, yes, it really does count. I'm sorry.
Kelly, what do you think, Kelly?
Well, like, I don't know, I came into it early high school or whatever, so I was still kind of at that age where I was like, oh, well, this is lots of fun, and it was, just a little bit genuinely freaky to me all at the same time. But, I've also, I didn't, like, grow up with it. So, I don't know, I bet there probably is a little bit of a difference for, like a kid watching this show. I bet, like, more recently the episode Listen with the spoiler alert, the thing under the bed and stuff, whatever, and like that would be so freaky. And I was watching that, and it was kind of, like, ooh, that's a creepy thought, but it would be so much fun to watch it as a kid, where it's like, oh my gosh. But so I bet there is probably a big difference.
One of my earliest memories is actually of a nightmare I had of Daleks and Cybermen chasing me around the backyard. I must have been about 4.
Yeah, that'll do it. I want to quickly ask the others in the chat here who are part of the class, who helped me with the class, to say hello. I will start with Ashley, who I really torture all the time by making her, have to handle all the things like the Twitter and stuff like that. So, Ashley, go ahead and tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, hi. I'm Ashley. Well, my computer is being weird, actually, at the moment. This is good.
You want me to come back to you? I can.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Alright, well, I took a class with Professor Rotolo last semester, which is how I got involved in this now, obviously. I started watching Doctor Who 2.5 years ago, thanks to Tumblr. Because I would always see posts on Tumblr. I was like, what is this show? And it was always pictures of David Tennant and then Matt Smith. And I was like, okay, well, I might as well look into this. And that's how I got watching it originally. And then, obviously, I fell in love with it because I'm obsessed with it. Starting to try watching Classic Who. Haven't watched that much. That's a big part of why this class is very useful for me.
Yeah.
What
Ashley,
else?
one thing I will share for you is Ashley is really one of 3 students that heavily influenced me to actually make this class happen. Part of it is because she really wanted to take it, right? And so I could thank her. Yes, I could thank her for that. One of the other students that really helped make that happen is Elise, who has, it seems, managed to join us. Elise, can you hear us?
Yes, I am finally here. Sorry about that.
Tell us about yourself.
About me?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've taken several classes from Professor Rotolo here, and I also am a recent convert to Doctor Who. I first saw an episode actually back in the 90s when a college roommate introduced me to Tom Baker, but I only got to see like a couple, and I didn't have any way of accessing it until recently with Netflix, and I had all these friends talking about it. And so my treat after surviving my first year of grad school was to, in the summer, getting all caught up on Doctor Who, which I did. And then I've recently obtained access to Classic Who, and so I've been trying to work my way through that. But yeah, so big convert, huge sci-fi nerd and fantasy nerd. It's what I love about this class is that we're all very similar in that way. And yeah, this has been absolutely fantastic so far, and I look forward to many more months of it.
Great. And last but not least, who I call my British ambassador, David, who is currently a Syracuse student and who's been helping with the class as well, and is from England. So, David, if you would introduce yourself.
Hi there, guys. I'm David. I'm pretty much a British consult on this. I was lucky enough to be able to go home this Christmas break, and I had plenty of the Christmas premieres and stuff like that to see on BBC, which I think we get maybe a little bit before you guys, which is unusual because we usually get movies after you guys. But no, it's a pleasure to be here, and I grew up with the sort of Eccleston Tennant era as I was in school in London, and then I came out here. I'm in my senior year here at Syracuse. And I've taken 2 classes previously with Professor Rotolo, and it's been a good time. So, hoping to make it won the charm.
Thank you. I call him my British ambassador because I always ask him silly questions about, am I referring to this properly? If I call this person, English, are they going to be offended because they're not, or something like, silly cultural questions that I just want to make sure I'm getting right as an ignorant American. But no, David's been really helpful, and he has taken some special trips to stores like the Doctor Who shop in London to get us some giveaways and things. So that's been really helpful. But that brings us to, I want to sort of throw a question out there for the group, and really this anybody can take this. For the first 2 weeks of class, we've been looking at the first Doctor, or as I said in lecture, the Doctor, right? He was the only one to play the Doctor when there was going to be no other Doctors, and so William Hartnell is quite different than all the other portrayals of the Doctor. And one of the things I wanted to ask is, of course, that's the common fan wisdom and the common analysis is that every Doctor that came after William Hartnell is really, if we can be attributed to a previous performance, it's Patrick Troughton's. The question is, do you see William Hartnell in future Doctors, in even Peter Capaldi's Doctor? Do you think that Hartnell's legacy is stronger in the portrayal or the character of the Doctor than he's often given credit for, or no?
I think Capaldi especially. I definitely see lots of Hartnell in Capaldi.
Not just second that.
Not just because he's about the same age as William Hartnell was when he started, but it's definitely in his mannerisms. He's definitely got some of those Hartnell mannerisms. Yeah,
Kelly,
very brusque, very brusque. and some of the other Doctors were, there was shades of. I mean, every Doctor I think has taken a little bit from all the previous Doctors, even if it's subconsciously. Yeah.
Kelly, I saw you kind of wave your hand. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I totally second that. Because Hartnell, I haven't really experienced a whole lot of him until the class. I haven't really had much access to those episodes. But yeah, I see a lot of Hartnell and Capaldi, which is great. I love it because it's like with the new regeneration cycle that came around with Capaldi's Doctor, it's like he's almost starting over again. Yeah. So you see a lot of the first Doctor again in this first new regeneration cycle. Dear God, I hope any of that made sense. You know what I'm saying?
No, it's really interesting.
I love the old.
It's really an interesting point that I want you to elaborate on for a second. I feel the same way that Capaldi may intentionally be doing more Hartnell than others because he has just started a regeneration cycle. Does the rest of the class sort of think that as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think what Capaldi brings in terms of Hartnell is he brings it back to we're not quite sure how to feel about the Doctor.
Yeah.
Hartnell obviously being the first one and being a grandfatherly type figure, we want to believe he's a nice guy because we like to think grandfathers are good people. But there are obviously situations that arise and decisions that have to be made where we're not entirely sure if we like him. You know, there are times when you can tell Barbara and Ian really don't like him, and times where even Susan questions his judgment. But he always tries to kind of, he seems to give the idea that he has a better idea of what the future will bring and can therefore make a more informed decision. And I think Capaldi brings a lot more of that to the table than certainly Matt Smith, who is fantastic. I absolutely love him. But he was definitely more on the idea of trying to be likable and sometimes doing the hard thing, but mostly trying to be likable. But I think Capaldi brings that question back into play of, is he a good man?
Right.
Is he someone who really is a good person? He's not evil, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's good just because he's not evil.
Right.
And so I like that Capaldi has brought that complexity back into the character of the Doctor. Now, keeping in mind, I don't have a lot of experience with the classic Doctors, so I'm really only bringing to the table, I've seen a lot of Hartnell, and then I've seen all the new ones. So I haven't seen any of 2 through 8. Well, except a couple, like I said, a couple of episodes of Tom Baker, but not enough to really get a sense of his character. So that's kind of how I feel about Hartnell versus others.
Sure.
Well,
Go ahead, James.
Oh, well, it's kind of following up on that or whatever. It's almost like you know, him questioning, am I a good man or whatever. It's bringing back the whole Doctor Who thing, and that's what I love most about it. We're all like, well, who, you know, after 50 years of Doctor Who history and stuff, we're all sitting back and we're like, oh yeah, we know who the Doctor is. Yeah, totally. No, not anymore.
Putting
the question mark back after the Who.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
But you get very much a sense of that with Sylvester McCoy as well. Sylvester McCoy, especially, like, remembers the Daleks, is especially notable. But several of his stories, just like, who the hell is this man, you know?
I wanted to build on Kelly's point. There's a quote from one of the writings about Z-Cars and Dixon of Doc Green where it says that the Doctor is a powerful force that can protect you, but he protects you by destroying your world, which I thought was like, whoa, that's like, whoa, that's like the deepest thing I've heard yet about it. And so that was a really good reading. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because one interesting thing that's going to come up when we look at session 2 and we start talking about Patrick Troughton is the argument, whether or not, you know, we believe it or we buy it, that Doctor Who becomes a little bit more embracing of the psychedelic movement in the 60s, and the idea, not to spoil lecture 2, but the idea that there is a journey to, you know, through a doorway of the TARDIS to another place where he does, in a sense, figuratively, if not literally, destroy your world or the perception of your world, and therefore lead to a new understanding. So it's actually interesting that you raise that point in reference to Hartnell, who I do think has those elements, but it's more subdued, and so was the case at the time, just culturally as well. James, did you want to throw something in there, or I couldn't tell if you were?
As I was going through these viewings of Hartnell's episodes, there's 3 quotes that like really jumped out at me as being very, like, any of the modern Doctors could have said these things. And one was Ian asked the Doctor why he always shows such interest in the least important things. And the Doctor says, the least important things sometimes, my dear boy, lead to the greatest discoveries.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of when Eleven says, in all my travels, I've never met anybody that wasn't important.
Yeah.
And then one time referring to Vicky, he says, she's just like me, always wants to know what's around the other side of the hill. And then there's another time where him and Barbara were somewhere scary, and she says, this place gives me the creeps. And the Doctor says, rubbish, I think it's fascinating. You could almost call it beautiful. Yeah. So it's like they're in mortal danger, but look how cool it is.
Yeah.
That sort of attitude.
And very early on, that's great. Great point, James. Very early on, we do see William Hartnell's Doctor finding what we could call beauty in things that may even be horrifying to humans and to his companions. And I definitely think that's something that carried through to the other doctors, and clearly he did that. So really, really great point there. So transitioning off Hartnell himself, moving into the enemies for a second, I sort of want to open the same type of question, but about the Daleks. The Daleks, unlike the Doctor, really don't change a whole heck of a lot over time. Sure, there are some changes and subtle changes or slight design tweaks and things, but really the Daleks are what we hear all the time, the pepper pots with the monotone voices. Why do you think the Daleks have remained so constant, where the Doctor and his show have really not? What is it about the Daleks that makes them work without changing?
They're pure evil. And evil is... well, I mean, it's true. I mean, their only function in anything is to just seek and destroy and exterminate everything. And that you know, while heroes can change throughout time, because, you know, the heroes of our show, the Doctor, you know, he goes through his ups and downs just like any person would or whatever, but I mean, like, evil is evil. It's always going to be evil, and they represent the truest evil that there is, which I think is why they are the constant or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so and building off that, because I think you're onto something, certainly with the sort of purity of their purpose, which is really one-dimensional in a lot of ways. David, I want to ask you, having grown up in London, or in England at least, I'm assuming you grew up in London, the Daleks are everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not only evil, but they're funny. And they're cute, and they're stuffed animals, and they're all sorts of things, right?
Yep.
Do they maintain their evil in spite of that?
I would say they maintain their evil with the older generations of watchers, the people who watched it when they first came out, and people of my parents' generation, really. Kids these days seem to find them more fun than anything else because of the stuffed toys and the various things you get dotted around London. There are numerous places in London where you can go and take a picture with a full-size Dalek, which is absolutely awesome. But yeah, I think they've definitely lost their touch a little bit with the younger generations. But they've still got it with the guys who watched Doctor Who back in the day before I did.
That's an interesting point, because I'm from that older generation, having born in '67, so I've got Troughton, and so to me the Daleks are always kind of like, they just leave them alone. They are what they are. Yep. Actually, it's funny, when we were over in England in 2012 for the 50th anniversary proms, we sort of did a bit of a tripping around, and we ended up in Cardiff, and we went to the Doctor Who experience, and they have an actual sort of interactive portion of it at the start before you get into the museum, and Daleks were involved, and they were like right there, full-size Daleks screaming at you, and I gotta tell you, it was kind of scary, even knowing it was just a thing, and I'm 40 whatever years old, and it's like, these guys were a bit intimidating,
Yeah, because your generation never grew up with them as stuffed toys. And quite so public a profile as they have these days.
They didn't become stuffed toys until I was already well in my 30s.
I think what's interesting too.
Go ahead, Elise.
Oh, sorry. I just think what's interesting too is, if you look at the Daleks in the classic episodes, and especially when we're first introduced to them, and I don't know if I brought this question up in class or on Twitter or where, I don't know. I know I've asked it before somewhere. Maybe it's even just you. But, you kind of wonder, okay, what makes these things really that scary? Because really it just looks like a little salt or pepper shaker with a plunger and a whisk and, an eye. So, what is really so scary about these things? And I think part of the thing that made them scary was, initially at least, Barbara's reaction. She screams. She's horrified by this. For whatever reason, we maybe don't know, but she is horrified, and I think that's what helps create the terrifying element of the Daleks. Because by the time they revived it in 2005, the Daleks had already been pretty firmly established as the ultimate enemy of the Doctor, and so they don't do as much with the reactions. Everybody just knows and assumes these are bad guys, these are evil. And so I think that's also kind of an interesting contrast, is I think to help build up the evil element of the Daleks, they had to rely more on the reactions of the people dealing with them, because, just looking at them, they really don't seem that freaky.
Right.
Well,
where you're getting at is something similar to what Heather was just saying. You said something, Heather, that I took note of. I think it was you, actually, that said the Daleks are what they are, right? Yes. I think that's interesting because in very few other cases, if any, Doctor Who or any series has stayed true to a statement like that the Daleks are what they are. And really, in most cases, they have with the Daleks, where we see the Cybermen change so much. Yes. In other fandoms, other universes like Star Trek, we see things like the Klingons and so on change so dramatically. But the Daleks always are what they are. And I had read something talking about how the Daleks were bug-eyed monsters, but they really weren't, because they don't really have obvious eyes or faces or anything like that. How much of that do you think?
No human characteristic. I think that's what makes them really quite creepy, is there's nothing human to focus on.
Right. Right. They you can't relate to them at all. So I think it's interesting, and it's really sort of commendable that Doctor Who has resisted the temptation to reboot the Daleks in any way that would change them from being what they are, the way you said. Along these lines, I wrote down something that another member of the class who isn't in the chat with us, Sarah Carba, said in one of her posts. She had a quote where she said, I knew, as she was watching the early Hartnell episodes, I knew the aliens were guys in suits, and the backgrounds weren't actually alien forests. But for some reason, I didn't care. And I sort of wanted to reflect on that for a second. This is somebody who, I'm hoping I'm not taking it out of context, but I'm assuming is watching this for the first time, not sort of a revisiting, and still in 2014, 2015, doesn't care that the special effects or the scenery and things are not realistic. Why is it that in Doctor Who specifically, and in very few other things, we're willing to say that we really don't care? And whoever wants to take a crack at that, what is special about Doctor Who in that sense? Is it really about bad special effects?
I think it's the mood they set. It's the mood they set with everything. It's like the sets and the lighting and the music, very much so the music, and just the stories. I mean, some of the stories are kind of cheesy these days. We'll get, I'm sure, to a few that are really super cheesy. But yeah, I don't know. It's just the mood they set. They really drag you in. They draw you right in.
Yeah.
Well, and I think building on that, I don't know, again, maybe it's just because so many years they just didn't have very advanced special effects, and so it kind of already had this tradition of sort of a little bit of campy feel to it, or at least that's how we describe it now. I'm sure they wouldn't describe it back in the day. So they've kind of had this campy tradition. But I think building off of what I think Heather said, it allows them to focus better on character development and story. And I think that's why we can suspend our disbelief and be able to say, okay, it doesn't really matter that it may look a little bit fake, because the characters are still real. The stories are still real. That we can resonate with something beyond the glamour of the special effects. Nothing against special effects. There's some TV shows and movies that have made great use of it and are still able to create great stories and great characters. But I just think that's something that has been the appeal of Doctor Who throughout time, is that it doesn't rely on those special effects to carry the show. The heart of the show is the characters, the stories they're telling, the experiences they're having, and things like that. And so that's why I think, whatever tradition it may have, whatever reputation for bad special effects it may or may not have, it doesn't matter, because we love it anyway.
Yeah, in the first class, at least in the first live session, I know I said something to the effect of that Doctor Who is about bad special effects and really big stories, or something like that. I had said, and I noticed a lot of people tweeted it and quoted it, and I don't, of course, mean that exclusively. But sort of carrying off that idea, who else thinks that the bad, or does anyone here think that the bad special effects, and I'm calling them bad sort of arbitrarily, but the clearly not fooling anybody special effects add to Doctor Who?
Low budget.
Take away. Is that the general consensus of the group, or and sort of how does
totally
that change
agree.
today in terms of the special effects getting much better? Does that take away from the Doctor Who-ness of the newer shows? What do you think?
I think it sometimes takes a very special person to appreciate it, because I can't tell you how many.
At the moment.
Can you hear me?
No, we're not hearing you.
I can
We'll
hear
have
it.
to come back to you, James.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know if the rest of the class can hear. I certainly can.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yes.
I can hear
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Now I forget what I was saying. The cheesy special effects or whatever. I've tried showing the show to we've all done this. It's like, hey, come watch the show, and we start them off with Eccleston or something, and the effects were a little bit cheesy then, and if you go back even further, they're even worse back then, But it's at the same time, some of my friends are they can't handle it. But a lot of my friends are like, oh my gosh, it's so endearing, and I think that's the key thing there. It's endearing because
there's a lot of people that will call B movies and things that are of that caliber, that lowbrow stuff. I don't know, they call that home just because it's that's what you watch. You have a bunch of friends over when you're young and you watch Night of the Living Dead 3 because it's just bad enough for an evening. But to put Doctor Who in a context for me is I'm actually use Star Trek again because I'm gonna go back. I started watching old classic Star Trek from the very beginning because I was seeing all this stuff online, all these inside jokes, and all this social culture that surrounds Star Trek, and that, to me, I got those jokes, I understood the context of them, but I'd never seen it before, so I was like, if I'm actually gonna appreciate these jokes and really have a love for it, I'm gonna go back to the very, very beginning. And so watching the first couple of episodes is difficult because it's there's foam rubber and everybody's wrapped in tinfoil, and but I think to build on why that campiness or why that B level is okay is because there's repetition. Both Doctor Who and Star Trek are episodic in that they have a formula. So it's we land somewhere, we figure out what's kind of going on, we walk outside with our helmets on and check out the place. And there's enough leeway in the formula in each episode for there to be a dynamic range between the characters, but the episodes are so, it's this happens, then it ends. This happens, so you can kind of watch them out of order. Yeah. And so I think that little tiny variance in the episodic portrayal of these stories is really what makes it so consumable. And because cheese is good, I guess.
Who doesn't love cheese?
Especially with wine.
Gotta love cheese.
Not everyone can hack it though. There's friends of ours who really love Doctor Who and stuff, and so we thought, if they love Doctor Who, we've got to get him into Blake 7. Well, they watched the first episode of Blake 7 with us, and they haven't watched any more. Because we're talking some seriously cheesy special effects, but really good story and character development,
Yeah. Okay, so as we're sort of rounding the second half of the discussion here, I kind of want to turn it over to you. I picked each of you, who are not TAing for the class, to be here and chat tonight because I feel that the things that you've shared and so on, that you each had something to say at this point in the class, and that I wanted to hear from your voices instead of just your typed words. But I know that you all have been reading everyone else's work in the Google Plus community and so on, and so I kind of wanted to go around the virtual table, I guess, and ask each of you to name one or more things, if you want, that you've read or taken away from that discussion that you wanted to comment on, that you wanted to highlight or challenge, or really all of the above. And whoever wants to throw something out there to start can do that. Even though we're looking at Heather at the moment, we don't have to put you on the spot. You don't want to. Who wants to tackle that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of really great posts that have been written. Some of the analyses have been great, and the discussion in general before we even started, there was some really great discussion going. But one that I noted that I haven't actually commented on this thread, but it's got quite a long thread and it's got some really interesting stuff to say, is one that Christopher Sin started, where he talks about the doctor. So where he says to Susan, you know, one day I will come back, and he says, well, actually, at this point, the doctor has no control of the TARDIS. He knows damn well he's very unlikely to ever be able to come back, but he says that to her anyway. And that kind of launched off this whole discussion, which sort of talked about Susan for a bit in the nature of whether she's is she really a time lady? Is she, what is she? Because the whole issue of regenerations and Gallifrey hadn't even existed back then.
Right.
And it sort of launched this whole discussion, which then got into issues of canon and all that. And I just found it a really fascinating thread in general.
Yeah, I did too. And one of the things that I wanted to ask, then bouncing off that, as you're talking, this made me think of this. Rather than pick apart sort of the fan theories and what's canon and what's not canon and all that, because clearly Google would never let us be live for that long. One of the things that I thought I would ask in reference to that is sort of general consensus, and we can even do it by show of hands if you want to. How many of you would like to see the Doctor to go back and meet Susan again in that context? Because clearly, Susan has appeared since. Not to make some spoilers here, but to go back, as he says, one day I'll go back and to rejoin her in that way, because he could. He's a time traveler. So how many would like to see that happen, or if you don't,
it would be. I think now it might be tricky because Gallifrey in this time lock, and even though Susan was supposedly on Earth, I don't know, because he kept going about how there were no other Time Lords, and so I think it would be tricky now.
Yes.
I would have loved to have seen it up to when he was Seventh Doctor, certainly, but.
I think it'd be an interesting.
I'd still like to see it, but it would be tricky for him to pull it off, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting, an interesting reunion to see. I mean, I'll be honest, I have no huge love of Susan. A little bit of that kind of annoying teenager or whatever. Well, and just the 60s trend towards females and hysterics, which is kind of annoying.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever. That's just playing off type. But despite that, I still think it would be a very interesting reunion to have and to see, okay, how did she evolve after leaving, and what happened to her, and how did she live her life, and and then kind of to see the contrast there. I think it'd be fascinating, even despite the challenges that Heather mentioned.
Yeah. Well, at least Carol Ann Ford is still alive,
Well, right, which is sort of the.
There you go. So it's possible.
Yeah.
You need to use all those actors while they're still alive.
She might be a different actor, yeah.
What made me really think about it, in terms of her being still alive, of course, which hopefully she is for many years to come, is the fact that what really jarred that for me was seeing Clara particularly old recently, and realizing that Susan could be old as well, and it would be okay. So that's just sort of where my head is going. Anybody think that the past is better left the way it is, and that when if modern Doctor Who stretches that far back, it's too much?
I don't know. I loved seeing Sarah Jane again.
Yeah.
When we got to see Sarah Jane in a school reunion, that was still brings a tear to my eye. Yeah,
boy, and they really addressed it too, and not to get too much into it, but they really did address the way that she parted with the Doctor.
Yes.
Which I thought was bold to do that, where it could have just sort of been in the past and a different Doctor, different time.
Yeah, just forgotten. But no, she's like, hey, you just abandoned me, in Aberdeen.
Yes.
See, I don't think it's too much of a stretch at all. I mean, that's the biggest perk of having a show about time travel, is that you can please all of your fans from, the 1970s who loved Sarah Jane Smith, and it's like, oh yeah, let's bring her back, and you can do crossovers with other characters, or other, like when they started doing crossovers with like Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures and stuff. It's like, that's the perk of having a show like this, is that they can get away with it. So I say it's not a stretch. They should be totally utilize that, because hardly any other show in the history of television can do that.
Yeah.
So.
That's true.
They're always bringing back classic villains. Like every season, they bring back a new classic villain. So,
I like that.
Like, why not bring back a classic companion every once in a while, or even like Paul McGann, who actually still kind of looks like his doctor.
Yes.
Like when they brought him back for his part, oh my God, I lost my mind. It was awesome.
So, James, is Paul McGann your doctor? I mean, really? I mean, the way you describe him, it sort of sounds like it.
I actually got to meet him in November at a con, and I told him he was my second doctor.
Okay. And your first one?
Would be Tom Baker.
Yeah.
He's and I love the modern guys, but Tom was the first. So.
Yeah.
And Paul was the second one that I watched, and I just wish there was more of him.
Yeah. I have to say, in planning the class, it's sort of like a build-up slowly to get to Tom Baker, and then almost in planning the class, it's like, how in the world am I ever going to do Tom Baker justice in really what's going to amount to 2 weeks of time? Because he has that. The way you're even talking about him, it's evident. He's just sort of takes hold of the role of the doctor, and
well, the first night of class, you were asking which doctor did everybody jump on board with, and most of the class said 9. A bunch said 10 and 11, and then you said 4. It's like I raised my hand, and maybe a dozen other people. So it's like you picked those 4 doctors, the 3 moderns, and Tom Baker. And it's
and what's so funny there too is time and again I've found that people who even started with the modern Doctor Who, when they go back and they watch the classic and they meet Tom Baker, suddenly he becomes their doctor, which is really interesting. That still today, and we'll of course we'll talk about him more directly later, but still to this day he has that effect of sort of wiping away a little bit the other doctors and being the doctor.
He also was the doctor for a lot longer than everyone else. So
7 seasons.
So this is true. Okay, so thank you. I mean, that all started with what Heather shared. Any other observations that anybody wants to throw out from what's been discussed in the community so far?
Well, a couple things that I posted, as you noticed in the Trending Now post. There was the one that I thought was very interesting, the one that linked to kind of the hierarchy of the Daleks, which would show that there has been some evolution. I mean, yes, there's still, evil, one-minded, single-minded goal towards, universal domination, but that there has been some evolution, and I thought that was fascinating. But then I also really liked how that could even then tie into another article that was linked about the concerns about artificial intelligence, and how there's always kind of that question of, sure, as we continue towards smartphones and better computers and anticipatory search engines and all these other things where they're trying to we have this technology that's trying to kind of anticipate what we need and what we want. So our technology is becoming increasingly capable of doing that. And so I just always find it interesting, though, and again, something that I know that we discussed in the Nexus class, just sort of, so how far should we push technology? When do we cross a line? You take into account, for example, the Cybermen, or again, a reference to Star Trek. You think about the Borg. These combinations of humans and technology, and sometimes we see disturbing trends towards that. Like clearly there's technology that helps us live better. Medical technology. Like pacemakers, even something as basic as that, but that help people's hearts stay healthy and all this other stuff. But then when do we cross the line to where we're more machine than man, and so it's all these interesting things. And so I really liked how those kind of tie in together. How as we think about the Daleks, which again, what I always find interesting too is that so many people, I mean that iconic mechanical shell is what people recognize, and I think so many people tend to forget that that's just the exterior. They are still a biological being on the inside, right? That they are very very weak, actually, biologically underdeveloped creature inside this technologically advanced machine. And so, again, kind of interesting contrast there. So as we think about the Daleks and the Cybermen and all these other technologically advanced enemies, and what does that mean for us? And so it's just, it's always kind of nice to check ourselves that, sure, as we make great advancements in technology, we need to keep in mind, though, where that boundary is and where it maybe should be, and just kind of, I guess, be aware of that in terms of how far are we going to go. So those are a couple things that I thought were very interesting.
Thank you. Yes, all really can say to that is yes, and it leads us very well into session 2, where we will indeed meet the Cybermen and start and continue that type of conversation. I think it's amusing also, as you were talking, that Kelly is tweeting at Paul McGann, letting him know that we are actually had just been mentioning him and so on. This truly is Doctor Who in the digital age, like I said, the first class. And so that really leads me to the last piece, even though I'm asking you to share your thoughts on what you're reading in the community and so on. I also wanted to reflect for a minute on this idea of this course being titled Doctor Who in the Digital Age, and really time traveling through Doctor Who because of our digital abilities, really sort of personified in a way, or sort of encapsulated in a way, by Kelly being able to simply tweet at Paul McGann as we're talking about him, or perhaps any of the other doctors. What does it mean to be a Whovian in the digital age, and is it different than being a Whovian before we could do this sort of thing?
Oh God, yes.
I think you're probably best equipped.
I was limited to, well, at least in Australia, in England, I think they got it like once a week.
Yeah.
In Australia, we got it like a couple of years delayed, but it did mean that we got to have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 nights a week. So usually, the 4-part stories were great because we could do a whole 4-part story in 1 week. But even so, it was like you watch an episode and there's your cliffhanger, and then you had to wait, and there's no way to speed that process up. Nowadays, you just bung in a DVD, watch it online, whatever,
Well, so you think that modern Whovians are spoiled by that, in the sense that there's a lot less hanging?
We're all spoiled in that respect, I guess. But I love it because it means I can get to revisit anything I want anytime I want.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, when I was a kid watching Tom Baker, I was young enough where I had really no idea about the greater fandom out there. It was like, me and my dad watching Doctor Who on a Saturday, and that was like the extent of my world about it. So getting to watch it as an adult in the digital age has been, if there's some reference in the show, you can just immediately get on Google and look it up, read about it, and so it's been been pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that level adds a whole other element to just the sort of Wikipedia or various other fan sites aspect of it, and really never needing to have a doubt about what's going on. We could just sort of look it up and find out. Kelly, what do you think? Do you think that being a Whovian in the digital age is different?
Oh yes, definitely. Because when I first started watching, which it wasn't way back then or whatever, but it was still kind of hard to come by episodes because we didn't always get let's see, I think they played it on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I couldn't always get the Sci-Fi Channel or whatever. This is back in 2005, 6 something. So I would have to scourge the internet for hours and hours and hours to find broken up clips of the episodes, and I would sit huddled up in my dad's office watching these old episodes of Doctor Who and whatever, and now it's oh yeah, everybody has it, it's on Netflix, and there's, I remember I bought me and my 2 best friends, they're twins, and as a graduation gift to all of us, I bought us all sonic screwdrivers, and I had to order them from England because we didn't have sonic screwdrivers in America, so it took 3 weeks to ship, and it was this big deal when it came in, and it's now, I see them everywhere, and you know, it's everywhere. So I mean, this is the prime time to be a Whovian, but you know, it's certainly a lot easier to be a Whovian now, because back then everybody was like, Dr. What? Or my mom calls this show Mr. Magoo, and my grandmother called it Mr. What, and I was just like, no, it's awful. I'm the only Whovian in my family, so
Clearly.
At least I had the advantage there. Back in the 60s and 70s, was you know, people in Australia at least knew what Doctor Who was.
Yeah.
It was big there then.
Heather, I want to ask you. Speaking of being in Australia at that time, do you see a difference in the need to not rely on memory in terms of what that old classic story was like, sort of oral history in a sense of maybe the common one that we talk about modernly now is the gunfighters and how it was forever known as being horrible, but then newer Whovians who approach it not knowing that don't think it's so horrible.
Yeah, that's not so bad.
Yeah, so what do you think about that as somebody who has watched Doctor Who in both ways?
Well, I've got to tell you, because I, as I say, I kind of grew up with Patrick Troughton, but they didn't repeat any of the Patrick Troughton stuff. When I was a little bit older, so like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of thing, we got lots of, you know, they showed all the Pertwees and they started showing Tom Baker, but then they started showing repeats. There was a couple of years where they just showed repeats, and so you got to see the same stories a couple of times, and so there are some stories that are really indelibly etched in my memory.
Yeah.
And there was, and like the Troughton stuff, you know, we were saying in the digital age, you know, can't go back to the old ones, and the old Troughton stuff that I had seen once when I was very little, I got to see for the second time when I was in my 20s, because we finally got pay TV in Australia, and we got a UK TV channel, and they started showing Doctor Who, and from the beginning, which is how I got tapes of them all, because I taped them off the telly. And finally got to see these, and I'd be watching a show and go, I don't remember this story, and then something would happen and go, oh, I remember that bit. I must have seen this story because I remember that bit, you know.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a fading of memory.
Yeah, and you know, Troughton, it's interesting to talk about Troughton in terms of the digital age too, because in a lot of ways, certainly he was the one most forgotten in terms of having his episodes lost and so on. Yes. But in a lot of ways, of the classic Doctors, one of the ones who's perhaps benefited the most from our abilities in the digital age, because we've been able to recover. Yes. And not only share the reconstructions that were done in the analog times, but also do some new things, like now that they're animating some of them, now that they're recovering and restoring. So, This group, I have to say, you guys are fantastic. Your opinions and your thoughts are so genuine and thoughtful, and I just appreciate the conversation so much. You have clearly lived up to what you are posting in the community, which is what made me invite you to this in the first place. And I just want to say that I appreciate that from all of you, and I hope that some or all of you will get a chance to join us in another one of these hangouts for the semester as we come to the last few minutes here.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. So with that, I will leave it to Heather, having had the last few words there on the digital age, and I'll wrap it up so we don't run over too much. Anybody have any last thoughts or anything you wanna say before we bid farewell to the hangout for now?
Alon Z.
Very good. Very good. And with that, we will conclude the first hangout. Thank you guys very much. Bye.
Bye.